Welcome, parents. What can I do when my child or student experiences fear? Well, I have a story that I want to share. So, I've got two sons. Braden is 9, and Noah is 5. So, a couple of years ago, when Noah had to have been about 3 years old, we visited our friends in Athens. So, we live outside of Atlanta. Our drive to Athens is about an hour and a half, and I'll tell you why that's relevant in just a moment. And our friends were really doing something special this Easter. So they had grilled a lamb, which was amazing, and they wanted to do the Easter dinner outside on their really large deck. It was a gorgeous day. They had everything decked out so beautifully, and we were having a lovely time. So when it was time for dinner, we headed back to the deck, and I remember we were all seated and passing plates around and enjoying good conversation when Noah saw a bee. He saw a bumblebee, and he freaked out. And when I tell you that he freaked out, our drive was an hour and a half. I just knew my neighbors back in Atlanta could hear him screaming, and he was all hands and all feet. My friends couldn't calm him down. I couldn't calm him down. At one point, I'll even admit I was a little embarrassed. I was like, Noah, what's going on? It's just a bee. And he knew that that bee was going to get him and get him good. And so there was no reassuring from me or my friends that was going to help the situation. So on our really long drive back home, I started worrying. He was talking about this bee endlessly. So I was thinking to myself, is this something that's going to stay with him? Is this something, I mean, he'd never been stung before. I really couldn't understand why he was having such a big reaction. You see, Noah is my adventurous kid. So he loves the outdoors. He loves sort of pushing the limits. He's sort of slow to warm initially, but then after that, all systems go, right? So as a parent, I really was concerned about any sort of lasting effects this encounter with the bee never stung him, would have. So surely for about a few weeks, he was hesitant around flowering plants and flowering bushes. He mentioned the bee quite a few times during the weeks, and then he sort of forgot about it. So I'm happy to report that Noah loves to be outdoors in the spring and in the summer. And I can't say that he just has joy in his heart for bees, but it didn't really develop into anything that his dad or I would be really concerned about. So parents do wonder about how to manage fear. So I want to share with you that fear is actually a normal part of being a child. It's a normal part of childhood development, fear and anxiety. And so some of the top fears that children have, I don't know if you can guess. The first one is fear of animals, such as Noah's fear of the bee. Some children fear dogs. And the second one is fear of the dark. That probably is one that you would have guessed. And then the third one is fear of imaginary monsters or ghosts. So that monster, that thing that's under the bed, right? So those are super common. Actually, they're the top 3 common fears that children have. Other fears that you might be surprised about or not is fear of going to the doctor. Now, if you think about it, and this is actually for children or for students, older kids, if you think about it, who really wants to get a shot, right? So even if your child hasn't experienced a shot, that actually is a really common fear. But what if I have to get one? And so that might actually lead to avoidance of those doctor visits that are so important during their development. And then the other fear that you might be surprised about is fear of vomiting. Yes, that is a thing. Fear of vomiting and also fear of watching someone vomit. So for a lot of the girls that I treat, that's in the preteen category, that's something that they bring up all of the time, and it's very much associated with anxiety. So fear is a part of childhood development. In fact, several studies mention that 90% of children between the ages of 2 and 14 have at least one specific fear. So if your child is expressing a fear of the dark or fear of the neighbor's dog or fear of a bumblebee like my Noah, know that that's perfectly normal, and most childhood fears go away with no intervention with time. Some can be persistent. But what I want you to know is that you, as the parents, mom and dad, who love your child very much, can actually play a really key role in helping your child to manage those really intense fears. So, the first step to remember is you want to resist the urge to jump in. Yes. As parents, when we see our kids really distressed, it's such an instinct of ours, right? It's so natural for us to want to jump in and swoop in and be helpful in some way, especially when their fear is intense and the fix is pretty simple, right? There are no monsters under the bed, and you say that until your face turns blue. 55 times. There are no monsters. Everything's okay. We do a lot of reassuring and a lot of comforting, and that's natural for us as parents. So I remember at least a couple of times being at the playground on those play dates, and a couple of times with my kiddos, the play date looked like it was going to go awry, and I had to sort of resist the temptation to jump in. Because what I know through my training and through my study and through working with clients and working with families is that when we as parents, as tempting as it is, jump in to kind of save the day and help out and provide comfort, too often that really sends a message to our kids and our students that somehow they aren't capable, which couldn't be further from the truth. So, what we know about anxiety is that it doesn't zap competence, right? It zaps confidence. So, when we are sort of keeping our children from dealing with those hard things or those hard conflicts or those scary events, then we're kind of sending the message that they don't have the confidence to be able to work out the fear themselves. So if you are working with or if you are raising a child or a student who is having difficult interactions or conflicts with friends or peers, what I would recommend is to listen intently, respond with empathy, and then go into problem-solving mode with them, right? You can simply ask, what would you like to see happen in this situation, right? And it's perfectly okay if you're raising a small child or a young child to say, how did that go wrong for you? What did your friends say? What did you say back? And how would you like that to go maybe the next time you guys are playing together? So you're still involved, you're still intervening, but you're not rescuing them from the situation because it's so important for them to be able to cope when in the future if those situations happen. So the second reminder or tip that I want to offer is to help your child to devise a strategy. So again, in lieu of kind of pulling them out of the situation or teaching them that avoidance is really the way, it's so much more helpful for you to, when they're calm, to kind of think through a scenario that could occur that could bring about some fear, some anxiety, some trepidation. So I think role plays are really great for this because our kids have wonderful imaginations, so even if something hasn't happened yet, they can pretty much imagine how it's going to go and the emotions that they're going to experience and what's probably going to happen next, right? So you can have them kind of walk through that scenario, but really engaging them in problem-solving techniques, right? Well, A could happen, but what if we introduce B or C? How would that make you feel? Do you think that your anxieties would decrease in that situation? And along with developing a strategy, I think probably the best thing that we can teach our kids and our students is to name their emotion. When you put a label to a feeling that you're experiencing, research shows that the emotion starts to dissipate. It may still be there, but with much less intensity. So that helps you to sort of engage that other part of your brain where you're able to kind of think through things with a clear head, and you can develop a plan and problem solve. Because initially you're right in your amygdala, which is your emotional center, and it's so hard to think through things when you're reacting as opposed to responding. So helping our kids to develop emotional literacy, it's so important. And there's so many things that are out there right now, so many wonderful resources, all of the feelings charts that we remember from maybe our pediatrician's office or our kindergarten or first grade teacher. There's so many that are out there right now on Google. The ones that I use for my older clients are the feelings wheel. So again, lots out there, but that's so important for kids to be able to name their emotion. And then lastly, with regard to devising a strategy, I would recommend that you actually offer your child an escape. So, not like a full escape where they can't go to school, because that's not going to happen. They can't just not show up for a team sport because the team is relying on them. So, we don't want their fears to be an excuse not to live full and meaningful and fun, productive lives, because fear can do that, right? It could prevent you from engaging in a meaningful way. But what you could do is you can say, you know what, when you're feeling this and you're able to sort of like name the emotion, think through what you might want to do. And if it's kind of leaving the situation, you won't be able to leave fully, but can you step away for just a few minutes just to sort of gather your thoughts, breathe through it, which we'll talk in just a minute, and give me a call. And by the way, that works with older children as well. I have so many clients that are teenagers who really appreciate being able to text their parent in the middle of a difficult time at school. Maybe they've got test anxiety, or maybe they're having a hard time with a peer, and just say, Mom, I just need you to give me a pep talk. And then sometimes I actually have one client who used to not be okay with field trips. She just didn't feel, it was almost like a form of anxiety around leaving the school building. She didn't feel as safe. But what was helpful was that her mom said to her, you know what? We'll just call her Melissa. Melissa, you can give me a call and we'll just talk through it. We'll talk through it. You're going to have to go to the field trip because I think it's important for your enrichment, but let's just talk through what it is that you're feeling, and let's see if you actually feel better. So devising a strategy is really helpful. Help them breathe through it. So as a mental health therapist, one of my go-to strategies to help with anxiety or depression or just life pressures is breathing. So there are so many different breathing techniques that are out there and available to you. Really, one of my favorites is box breathing or triangle breathing. So just to give you some information about why breathing is so important. So I'm sure as an adult, at some point in your life, you've heard someone say to you when you're having a moment of crisis or a moment of intense stress, just take a deep breath. And maybe you've actually said that to your child or your student, and there's a reason why that works. Breathing is actually one of the most simple and effective ways of reducing your heart rate, reducing the cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, and activating what we know as the parasympathetic nervous system. But basically, that's just the part of your nervous system that signals to your body and your brain to calm and to feel relaxed. And so what I tell my clients all the time is that there's so many protocols that are out there, but the most important thing to know when you are nervous about a test, when you're about to go out there and play that sport, when you're about to go out there and play that musical instrument and you feel those butterflies, is to slow down your breathing, make it more rhythmic, and make it more regular. Because when we get nervous, we tend to do the shallow breathing, which actually makes us feel more panicky. So breathing is so wonderful for young children. The shape breathings, as I mentioned earlier, or the shape breathing protocols, such as the square breathing or the triangle breathing, is super helpful. The triangle breathing is really simple. You start off at the with the bottom edge of the triangle, and you breathe in, and then you hold as you go up to the right side, and then you blow out as you go down to the other side. There, you've completed one full breath. And finally, offer positive feedback. When you see your child engaging in something that normally would bring about a lot of fear, you really want to encourage their success, even if it's little by little. Let them know that you see that they're trying their best, and it's so important for them to see that you notice that they're putting in good hard work and effort. And for your older students, it's so helpful to remind them of a time where they had a fear that felt so intense and unmanageable, but they were able to cope and overcome it. Letting them know that you remember is going to be so helpful for them, and also mentioning to them that you believe that they're so capable of overcoming the fears that they're experiencing right now. And you always want to use very specific praise and feedback. So, for example, if you have a student, let's say Stacy, who has been really having a lot of fears around going anywhere where she doesn't know that her friends are going to be there, and that's been limiting her socially. If you notice that she actually attended a pool party, for example, and maybe stayed a couple of hours, and let's say the party really lasted the entire afternoon, you want to be really specific in your praise. You want to say, Stacy, I am so proud of you that you were able to go to that pool party knowing that none of your friends were going to be there. Again, her knowing that you're paying attention to the fact that she's really putting in a lot of hard work and effort is going to be so helpful to her. And finally, parents, know that it's probably going to take some time for your kids and your students to overcome this fear, but fears are manageable. And fears can actually feel really, really powerful to our kids. So, for younger kids especially, it may take a few tries, a few practice runs of using some of these coping techniques. And parents, finally, stay consistent, stay patient, and praise your child's hard work.